Good afternoon. How are you? Not a bad day. The sun makes a difference. It just generates a little bit of extra heat. So it's 53 degrees, but it's more comfortable than it was yesterday. Humidity's up 60%, and the wind, they say, is at 9, and I do feel a little breeze, but nothing that will interfere, at least so far, with our communications. Trump must like to say, "You're fired." And anybody who's ever had to fire anyone or be fired knows that that is an assault on the individual's worth, integrity, dignity. And so how it's done is even important, when it's justified. I had a fellow working for me once, and he was working on our farm at the time, and he kept slipping the truck into the manure pit. And we tried various things, and he would play the most beautiful music. And so I said to him one day, that great American philosopher, Clint Eastwood, said a man ought to know his limitations. And I said, I'm afraid we found yours. I'd be glad to give you a great recommendation, but every time you go into that manure pit is a problem. So that's as friendly a separation as you can have. But for Trump, these things are joys. He loves hurting people. He loves saying you're fired. He loves destroying people's lives. There are stories of his best friends being in an office with him, and he has an open mic, if you will, to the guy's wife and talks about the women who are coming in town he can be with. This is the kind of person he is. And I suppose it shouldn't surprise us if his friends are like that, and they think that this is cool. Who knows? So it's all the better that today that a San Francisco judge says not so fast about the firing. Tells them offer their jobs back. This is Judge William Alsup out in San Francisco. And the court said, if there's a reason to get rid of employees, or if it's necessary, then he instructed them to follow the Federal Reductions in Force Act, which sets forth how you go about this. Now, in any long enough, healthy life, you go through different jobs at different times. And that, and perhaps how one defines oneself in a relationship or a marriage, are the two really delicate points. And that's why people get very upset, rightly and wrongly, when you have any criticism about their conduct or their worth, either as a worker or as a family member, or friend. So this guy doesn't feel any of those things. This guy feels joy. He's the kind of guy that pull the legs off Daddy Long Legs. He's just that kind of a person. So this is what we have. We have him working in a certain way. And it's about the threats of coercion and intimidation and fear. And so you have as I believe, it's the triumvirate. It's Trump, it's Bannon, and it's Musk. And these three guys in their clown car imperil our nation in so many directions, in so many ways. We're in a nation where the Just Us department and others promote HR and immigrant and criminal misconduct against areas of the law they're sworn by oath, by history, by common sense to protect people when it comes to human resources, to look very carefully at how we handle immigration for our promise as the land of the free and the home of the brave. And we have to control corruption. And so we now have this afternoon, Friday afternoon, and I haven't heard it, but I understand Trump is going to speak to the Department of Just Us. And he's going to be praised by Bondi if she hasn't already done it. And What kind of a messy goulash have they created procedurally? It's a mix of Kafka's trial and Orwell's 1984. They don't want words that meaningfully describe their misconduct, so they're trying to strike words from a vocabulary. It's something that you can see in 1984 in the book. They describe it. And so we also have the far right has decided under Trump, we'll take up space in Louisiana. And so they have some inmates moving there, returning from Gitmo. And Khalil, who is the graduate student at my old alma mater, Columbia, was spirited off to Louisiana. And they didn't have their facts straight. So that's why I say Kafka's trial in 1984 is examples of who they are. You're in the way. We disagree with you. We can use you as a political prop. We don't care if your wife is 8 months pregnant. We don't care if you only exerted yourself in free speech. We have no proof you did otherwise. At least we haven't disclosed it to the public so far. So this is the way our government is doing business. Funny business, bad business, hurtful business. So Khalil, I don't think he's been released yet. And it remains to be seen in another confrontation between the rule of law and due process, which just really means fundamental fairness, and the brown shirt efforts of Trump's from high-tech to low-person individuals who support these efforts. So this is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with those who would bring us down in their terrible and rotten methods. Now, if you know his wakefulness, felon Trump, then you can get a pardon. Ask Mel Gibson. He wants a handgun. There are certain kinds of convictions in which the pardon attorney may not give a person his handgun or other guns. And the attorney, the pardon attorney, refused Mel Gibson's request to have a gun. He said, I'm a friend of the president, and that doesn't cut it. And she reported her recommendation was that he could not receive a pardon. And she spoke about it. And she's been fired. But she stood up for herself. And she stood up for the principle that emboldened her to have the courage to say, I'm not doing this. You say, why not just go along? Because it is that resolve to do what's right that makes this country great in the first place. And so if you say, what are the chances Mel Gibson will shoot some woman with the gun that I authorize him to have? Do you think it's remote? Do you think it's possible? Certainly possible. It's not a case that lends itself to facts that suggest he's different in some way or other. So no, you don't give him a gun. And you lose your job for doing the right thing. And some time ago, I talked about the Ibsen play, Enemy of the People. And different subject, similar moral choices. The doctor in the piece has found that the water system is not safe. The water system is also a source of economic comfort, or at least survival, for the community. And so the doctor, who expects people are going to cheer him for disclosing this terrible emergency, is instead run out of town. The enemy of the people is in fact the benevolent stranger in his own community doing what's right. So am I comparing the pardon attorney to the doctor? Yes, I am. I'm talking about a sickness in a community that doesn't have a right set of standards by which to measure that they are civilized or not. And civilized, as some leaders might say, is not focused and committed on conquest. That is not our definition of civilization. The standard of civilization is how we treat our own. And there's no question about that. But we have to battle on the other side. The judges are doing hard work. But you know what they're trying to do with them? There's a move in Congress to impeach judges who actually do their job, who are the friends of the people, not the enemies, who are concerned about our well-being and the kind of nation that we aspire to be. Trump is tearing all of this down as if to destroy us from within so that we can't interfere with overreaching by other dictators around the globe, and or perhaps in some deal, personal to Trump or not, that makes this possible. You have to ask yourself, can you discount what he says and does as merely being some sort of person afflicted with ill health, mental ill health? Yeah, it may be part of it, but aside from personality disorders, he's just an evil man. And why people don't adopt that, accept that, and understand that as a predicate for action against or for others is beyond me. More see it. And perhaps the best example is how we shrink from battle. We are voting on a continuing resolution, a spending bill, what the government can spend, and they can't do it without the authorization of Congress. And so the proposal was, okay, the House passed it, Democrats objected, but didn't have a margin to stop it. But in the Senate, you need 60 votes. And the Republicans don't have enough votes to get to 60 on their own. And at first it appeared that the Democratic leader in the Senate, Schumer, would come out on the right side of this and say, although we don't want to shut down the government, it seems to be no alternative to a continuing resolution that could compromise us severely. And then it's like somebody slapped him in the face with a wet salmon and he comes spinning around, and now he is going to support the continuing resolution. Democrats are mad. I'm mad. You may be mad. You should be mad. Because this is not how we do business. You can't win the argument you don't make. You can't win the fight you don't show up for. You can't protect the nation if you're not ready to fight for democracy. Schumer has failed on all points. And you know, I like the guy. I go back to when I was his special counsel for a period of time when he was still in the House before he became a senator. But we can't shrink from the battle. This is not a campaign in which we're dealing with fictions about what's going on. We told the truth during the campaign for president. They didn't. Okay, that's done. But let's not continue to be victims by silence, acquiescence in our murmurings instead of shouting out for change. Younger members of both houses are up in arms, and they're speaking out, and they're doing what those with seniority should be doing, because we need every hand involved in keeping the rudder straight ahead for republic and democracy, and that's not the case right now. And so some people are even talking about a primary against Schumer in New York. Okay, and then there are others talking about running primaries against members of Congress who have not been stern and active enough. It's not a question of age. Bernie Sanders is out there on the stump visiting Republican districts, telling them how we can make a difference. Now, I'm doing this early enough, I'm not even sure that the vote has happened in the Senate. But the right vote in the Senate is to take what may by resisting this resolution that is wrong and hateful and it's not clean in the sense that it doesn't change anything, it changes things. The objective of the Republicans is to diminish entitlements. You know, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, CHIPS, you name it. In any way they can. The number of chairs people have to sit in, the number of offices, the number of people who work there, and the list goes on. And we have to fight that fight. And we can't do it by surrendering when this bill comes to the floor. And we have to have changes. Now, in the days ahead, this is going to continue. And we'll see how the triumvirate, and other sad people who can only think of themselves and hurting others, we'll see how we fight back in the courts and in protests and at hearings in Congress and as special elections come up and in the messages that we must give to people. Let's not have any more of this silly nonsense in which we have members of Congress standing out there looking uncomfortable, off balance, saying, "We will win," and saying it with a weak voice. Why don't we have blasting music and a whole hall filled with people? Why aren't we in court as friends of the court telling them what's wrong with these bills? Luckily, we have 24 attorney generals for the states fighting some of these battles. We have the ACLU. We have employment organizations. We have students about Columbia. That's the path to restoring the United States to the republic it was and protecting our democracy as the one guarantee of freedom for the people who live in this once great nation. Not greater because of Trump, compromised and at risk because of Trump, putting us in response to that question by Benjamin Franklin when asked, do we have a republic? You have a republic if you can keep it. We better keep it. We've seen it. We know what it's like when you don't have it, and we have to work at it. And so we have the energy. On to the next fight. So that's what I got. So I'll talk to you tomorrow from my Cathedral of Trees. All the best. Bye-bye.